There is 1 month until the Iowa GOP caucus, and new polls show former President Trump with still a commanding lead in that state. There's a new poll that shows 62% of adults believe democracy is at risk in November's election for different reasons. 72% of Democrats said a GOP win would hurt the country, compared to 55% of Republicans who said it would be a threat to democracy if the Democrats retain control of the White House. Then there's a separate poll, and this one shows few Americans are excited about this ticket, a possible Biden-Trump rematch, and Trump is leading Biden in several swing states right now. Boyd Matheson is with us. He's a Republican strategist, former chief of staff for Senator Mike Lee, and host of Inside Sources on KSL. TGIF, boy, the race is on for Iowa. Everybody who is in this primary wants the votes. How accurate is Iowa caucus polling right now? How much weight do you put into this?
You know, the closer we get, the more indicative it actually becomes. Anything outside of 30 days in Iowa has historically not been so great. Inside of 30 days, they're pretty good at actually predicting who is it that's willing to actually show up on a very cold, dark night on the 15th of January in Iowa and not just cast a ballot, but stick around often for hours to go through that caucus process. And so I think it's getting fairly close. I do think the former president will win Iowa pretty handily. But there's also a lot that goes into that. It's also important to recognize that Iowa doesn't always get it right. We sort of have this idea in the country of this coronation process that goes through Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. And that's often not been the case in the end. Of course, you had John McCain, who ended up 5th in Iowa, became the nominee. You had the battle between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. There's a lot of history in terms of these early states not getting it right. So while I do think the former president will be the dominant force there in Iowa 30 days from now, this is a long, slow slog. And that's very important for viewers to recognize. Between those first 3 states, there's just 115 delegates at stake. And whoever wants to be the nominee has to get 1,235 delegates. So there's a long way to go. And to your point on the other polling, in terms of people not being too excited about a Biden-Trump 2.0 version, I think that's why you do have groups like No Labels, people like Joe Manchin, who are saying we're not even going to decide until Super Tuesday if we think there is a need for a third party candidate. It just sends a message that this is going to be a long process, and we should let it be a long process, not a coronation.
Right, that's sort of the point. Whoever wins Iowa, and by how much, at this point, it looks like Trump will. Does that momentum carry over into New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada?
Yeah, there is this interesting thing in America. Everyone wants to be part of the winning team. And so sometimes it does become a self-fulfilling prophecy in those first 3 states. But we should resist that inclination and just kind of let things play out. There's a lot of things that are going to happen in the early months of 2024, including some of the former president's legal challenges that are going to become more dominant, more front and center in a lot of news coverage and headlines. And so while typically those first 3 states do get the momentum going, because most people jump on board and, again, want to be part of that winning story. So that means campaign cash and donations go up, coverage goes up. And so there are great advantages to getting that early momentum. But I think it's also important to remember, Marni, that both former President Trump and President Biden, they know they want it to be a coronation. They want everyone to believe this is over after those first 3 states because it's in their best interest. Both of those gentlemen also know their best path back to the White House and another term is through each other. So they're sort of interdependent in that way. And it will be interesting to see if any other candidate or if the American people really do say what that graphic is showing, that people are not excited about the choice in that rematch. And will the American people finally say, we want a third choice. We want a different alternative. The last time we had an alternative third party win was actually a guy named Abraham Lincoln. And it actually turned out really well for the country. I don't know if we have an Abraham Lincoln waiting in the wings, but we should have that kind of conversation as a country in terms of if we are dissatisfied with what we have, are we willing to take the risk of voting differently? So often we are afraid. We're afraid if we, don't vote for this person, spoiler candidates and so on. We're very afraid of losing power and losing prestige. And so we have to look in the mirror as voters and say, if I'm really dissatisfied with this, what am I going to do about it with my vote?
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.